Okay, good morning, my dear fourth year students in the morning studies, and good evening for the students in the evening studies. Today we are going to continue talking about the simple sentence patterns. In the first video, we were talking about the first two patterns, and here we are going to talk about the rest five ones. That's why it is going to be a long video. By the way, this video is going to be dealt with, or we are going to deal with it on Tuesday. It is not for Monday, okay? Not for the Google Meet on Monday, but it is for Tuesday, okay? We are going to talk about the rest of the patterns, which are five. They are patterns 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. In fact, I specified a specific lecture to talk about these five patterns on purpose because they share somehow the same verb. The same type of the verb can be found repeated in these patterns. So the verb in these patterns is of a different category, as we are going to deal with what the transitive intransitive type of verbs. If you remember, in the first two patterns we dealt with the intensive verb, and here in these five patterns we are going to deal with the transitive intransitive type of verbs. So a verb can be described as transitive or intransitive, and I believe that you know that based on what, whether it requires an object to express a complete thought or not. So the transitive verb is the verb that needs an object to complete the idea of the sentence, while the intransitive verb does not need an object. So in English, we can have certain verbs which are all the times are transitive, other verbs that are all the times are intransitive, and there is a third type of verbs that can behave both in both ways. That's to say they can be transitive and intransitive. So in order to understand the idea of the transitive verb, they said that this word transitive is in fact taken from the word transfer. How? A transitive verb needs to transfer the action to something or someone which is represented in the sentence by the object. Who is doing the action? We know that the doer of the action is what? The subject. So what is the function of the verb here? The function of the verb is that it transfers the effect of the action that is done by the verb to someone or something, and this someone or something is represented in the sentence as the object. That's why it is called what? A transitive verb. A very important feature of the sentences that contain a transitive verb is that they can be transformed from the active voice into the passive. Or in other words, we can say that the verbs the sentences that have transitive verbs in their structure, they have two forms, active and passive. The transitive verb is not of a one type. It is in fact, as we are going to see, it is of three types: monotransitive, complex transitive, and ditransitive, and we are going to explain the difference between these three types of transitive verbs as we are going to explain or to deal with the patterns in detail. So we are going to start with pattern 3. Pattern 3, or the sentence that belongs to pattern 3, has this structure: subject, monotransitive verb, direct object. For example, you have this sentence: heat expands metals. The verb, of course, any sentence in English starts with what? With a subject, followed by a verb. The type of the verb we can find in this sentence that belongs to pattern 3 is called a monotransitive verb. So what do we mean by a monotransitive verb? It is the verb that takes only one object, and this object is called the direct object. And it is clear from the prefix mono, which means in Latin one, and here we can understand monotransitive is the verb that takes only one object, and this object is called what? The direct object. So when as we said, such a sentence, since it has a direct object, it can be transformed into what? A passive. So how many sentences can I have in the passive voice? Of course, I'm going to have only one sentence. Why? Because I have only one object. Okay, and I think that you know the steps that we have to follow in order to change the sentence from active into passive. For example, if we examine the sentence, heat expands metals. This is an active sentence. Why is it an active sentence? Because we know that the subject is usually the doer of the action. Do we know who is doing or what is doing the expansion, or what is expanding the metals? Yes, it is mentioned in the sentence, which is heat. That's why we call it what? An active sentence. In order to change it into passive, there are steps. First of all, you have to delete the subject. Instead of the subject, you are going to use what? The object. So the object in the passive is going to be what? The subject, metals. Then after the subject, the new subject, you need what? A verb. And the verb in the passive has a specific structure, which is what? It consists of what? A verb to be as auxiliary, followed by a verb in the past participle. So expands is going to be what? Are expanded. And you have to choose a suitable auxiliary, the suitable verb to be the auxiliary according to the tense of the sentence, and according to whether your subject, your new subject, is singular or plural. Okay, so metals are expanded. What about the subject, the original subject of the sentence in the active voice? Are we going to delete it? You see, I have put it between what? Between two brackets, by heat, to tell you that it becomes an optional element. So I can say the sentence without it, and I can say the sentence with it. Metals are expanded, and I can stop, or I can say metals are expanded by heat. The sentence in the passive also has a pattern. So if we analyze the elements that we can find in this sentence, we can find that it starts with the subject, which is metals, are expanded, it is the verb, and you see that here I wrote beside the subject PASS to say that this verb has a passive structure. Then by heat, it is an agent, okay, and you see it is put between the by heat itself and the structural element that it represents, which is agent, capital A. Both of them are put between two brackets to tell you that it is an optional element. You can delete it from the sentence. This is pattern number 3. Go to pattern number 4. In fact, pattern number 4 and pattern number 5, you are going to see that they share the same type of the verb. They also start with the subject, followed by a verb, and this verb here is going to be called complex transitive. Why is it called complex transitive? We have to look at what comes after this verb in order to understand how or why is it called complex transitive. This verb complex transitive is followed by, again, one object, and it's called the direct object, and followed by adverb of a place. So you see here, it is a complex transitive because it is followed by two elements, the direct object, and in pattern number 4, you are going to see the adverb of a place. For example, I put the pencil on the table. I is the subject, put is the verb, which is complex transitive. The pencil is the direct object. On the table is an adverb of a place. If I ask you, the adverb of a place on the table is related to which element in the sentence? Is it related to the object or to the subject? Of course, you are going to answer and to say that it is related to what? To the object. It complements the meaning of the object. Okay? And again, as we have explained in pattern number 1, the adverb of a place can be a simple adverb or it can be a prepositional phrase, as we see in the sentence. On the table, it is a prepositional phrase. What about another important question? The adverb of a place here, is it an obligatory or optional element? Let us try to delete on the table from the sentence and see what effect that it can make or can cause to the structure, to the meaning of the sentence. If I say I put the pencil and stop, what do you think of my sentence? Does it have a complete idea? Is it a meaningful sentence? Of course not. So I have to tell my listener about the exact place, the exact position of the pencil. So that's why the direct object should be complemented by the adverb of place. So we have a direct object here in the sentence. So is it possible to change it to change such sentences or the sentences that belong to this pattern into passive? Yes, we can. As long as we have a direct object, we can change them, the sentences of this pattern into into passive. How many sentences can I have in the passive? I can have only one sentence because I have only one object. So this sentence, I put the pencil on the table. In the passive, it becomes the pencil was put on the table. Yeah, so you are going to follow the same steps of changing the sentence from active into passive. And again, what about the subject that you have deleted from the active sentence? You can say by me, or you can delete it from the sentence, and because it is an optional element. And as we said, the adverb of a place here is obligatory, while the agent that represents the deleted subject is what is optional. Number 5, as I told you, pattern number 5 is similar to pattern number 4 in the type of the verb. So you see here also we have a sentence that starts with subject followed by complex transitive verb. Here the complex transitive verb is followed by direct object, and the direct object is followed by object complement. Okay, again we have a complex transitive verb that is followed by two elements, direct object and object complement. For example, they elected him a president. So they is a subject, elected, a complex transitive verb, him direct object, and a president object complement. Now, why do we call it an object complement? I am talking about the president. Why do we call it an object complement? Because it complements the meaning of the subject. If you remember, we talked about the complement, the element that is called complement in pattern number 2. In pattern number 2 we talked about the subject complement, and we said that it complements the meaning of the subject. That's why we called it what subject complement. Here the complement is related or complements the meaning of the object. So who is the president? Is it they or him? Him, and him is a direct object. That's why a president is what an object complement. If you remember, again, if we go to pattern number 2, we said the complement can either be a noun phrase or an adjective. The same thing here. The object complement can also be either a noun phrase or an adjective. For example, they elected him a president. A president here is what? A noun phrase. They proved her wrong. Who's wrong? Her. And what is the function of her? It is a direct object. So wrong here as an object functions as object complement, and its form is what? An adjective. We are going to ask the same question. Can we change the sentences that belong to this pattern into passive? Of course we can, because we have a direct object. So they elected him a president. In the passive, it will be he was elected a president by them. But I want you to pay attention to the structure of the sentence in the passive. Okay? So they elected him a president. The first step we have to do in order to change this sentence from active into passive is what? To delete the subject and use the object instead of it. So the passive sentence will start with he as the subject. Elected is going to be in the passive was elected. Now, a president is going to be here used after the verb. So the sentence in the passive, he was elected a president by them. Let us examine the structure of this sentence. He is the subject, was elected is a verb in the passive. Now a president. Who is the president? It is he. And what is the function of he? Subject. So a president now becomes what? Subject complement. Please pay attention to this. In the active voice, it was functioning as what? Object complement, because it complements the meaning of the object. But when we transform it into the active voice, it becomes what? Subject complement, because it complements the meaning of the subject. What about by them? It is an adjunct, and as you see that we have put it between two brackets to say that it is what? An optional element. 6. Pattern number 6 again starts with the subject. The transitive verb that we are going to meet here is going to be a little different. It is called die transitive, and die, di, this prefix, this is the number 2 in Latin. So why do we use it here? We use it here to say that this type of transitive verbs is actually followed by 2 objects and not 1 object. Indirect object and direct object. So OI, this is indirect object, and OD, this is what? Direct object. For example, she told the children a story. She is the subject, told, a di-transitive verb. The children, indirect object, a story, direct object. When we examine the structure of such sentences, we have to pay attention to the following points. Number 1, the indirect and the direct object are not ordered or arranged or put randomly in the sentence. No, they follow a certain order. Which one comes first? The indirect comes before the direct object. This is 1. Number 2, the indirect object has to be animate. What does it mean, animate? It refers to human beings, to people, okay? While the direct object can be both animate and inanimate. Again, what do we mean by animate? It means that referring to people, to human beings, while inanimate referring to things, places, or whatever. Okay? And we are going to deal with this in detail when we are going to deal with the semantic side of the sentence elements. Number 3. How many objects do we have here? We have 2 objects. So what does this mean? It means that we can change such a sentence or the sentences belonging to this pattern into passive, but in the, as long as we have 2 objects, this means that we are going to have 2 sentences in the passive. Is it clear? So we can use both of them or each one of them to be the subject and make a new sentence in the passive. If we look at number 1, the children were told a story by her. So here we used the children. If you remember, the children was functioning as the indirect object. So here we use the indirect object to take the place of what? Of the of the subject. So the sentence in the passive becomes the children were told a story by her, and the pattern becomes subject were told. The children is a subject, were told a passive verb, a story direct object, and by her an optional element, which is the agent. Then we can use the direct object to be what the subject in the passive voice. So the direct object, if you remember the sentence, was what? A story. So we can say a story was told to the children by her. So a story is a subject, was told a passive verb, and now here we have what? To the children. You see here, to the children. If you remember, the children were what? This element was functioning what? As the indirect object. In the passive, sometimes the indirect object can be changed into what? An agent. And some other times it can remain as, or it can be changed into, it will be changed as what? An indirect object. It will be, sorry, it will stay having the same function, which is what? The indirect object. It depends on the verb. Okay, the verb that you have in the sentence, whether it should be followed by an agent, a prepositional phrase functioning as an agent, or it needs an object, or it needs to be followed by an object. Okay, this is a very important point you have to remember about pattern 6. Finally, we have pattern number 7, and here we are going to have the intransitive verb. So the sentence that belongs to pattern 7 starts with the subject followed by intransitive verb. And I think you remember what we said about the intransitive verb at the beginning of the video. We said that the intransitive verb does not take an object. It can stand by itself, or it can be followed by adverb of a place, adverb of time, prepositional phrase, whatever, but it does not need what? An object. That's why we call it intransitive. For example, we said we have the sentence, the plan worked. The plan is a subject, worked is an intransitive verb. I can expand my sentence and say the plan worked well. The plan is subject, worked intransitive verb, and well, it is an adverb. So what do you think about well? Is it an obligatory or optional element? It is optional. You see, I said the sentence, the plan worked without well, and I said it with what? With well. So it is what? An optional element. But there are some sentences, some verbs that needs to be followed by adverbs, especially adverbs of a place, which are what? Obligatory in the sentence. For example, if we say we must go to the store, we must go to the store. So the verb here is must go, and then followed by to the store, which is a prepositional phrase functioning as what? Adverb of a place. As we said, that in English there are a certain type of verbs that can function both transitive and intransitive verbs. For example, she sings a song. She sings a song. She is the subject, sings is the verb, a song is what? A direct object. So here verb sings, this verb has the type of what? A monotransitive verb, because it is followed by one direct object. But if we say she sings beautifully, she sings beautifully, she sings in the party, okay, so are we going to have the same, or do we have the same type of the verb sing that we find in the first sentence? No. Sing here in the second sentence is followed by an adverb, or we can say just she sings, okay, just like that. That's why this sentence, or the second sentence, is going to belong to pattern number 7, because the verb is what? Is intransitive. Okay, and as you see, I put beautifully an adjective between two brackets to say that it is what? An optional element. So with pattern number 7, we have finished the patterns of the simple sentences in English. I hope that that we have covered the most important points that you need to know about these patterns. Please pay attention to the details, to the features that distinguished each pattern from the other. These are very important points. In the previous video, after we explained the first two patterns, I gave you an exercise. Here I'm going to give you three exercises which I need you to practice doing it in order to develop your ability in identifying or dealing with patterns of sentences. So here we have three exercises. Exercise number one is asking you to identify the pattern of the following sentences. You have 5 sentences. I want you to read them carefully and tell me the pattern. Okay? Exercise number 2, which again asks you to identify something, but this time you are not going, you are going to identify the close patterns, but these sentences are not the original sentences, they are transformations. Okay, so I want you to identify the close patterns of the original sentences. Is it clear? So for example, number 1, 20 civilians were killed in the bomb explosion. I think that you can identify or know the structure of the sentence. If you examine it carefully, if you look at it carefully, you can understand that it has what's the structure, and so it is a transformation. A transformation of what? What is the original sentence? And when you arrived at the original sentence, I want you to tell me what the pattern of the sentence. Okay? So it needs a little bit of thinking. We have exercise number 3, which is also about ambiguous sentence and ambiguous sentences in English. And I think that you dealt with ambiguous sentences in grammar, especially in the 3rd year. So exercise number 3 is asking you to say whether the following sentence is ambiguous or not. If it is not ambiguous, say it is not ambiguous. It is clear, okay? But if it is ambiguous, if so, explain how. We can have more than one, but for the time being, it is enough for us, or sufficient for us to deal with only one sentence as a practice, okay? So the sentence is what? They called her a doctor. What do you think of this sentence? Is it ambiguous or not ambiguous? To tell you a hint about the ambiguous sentence, the ambiguous sentence is the sentence that has 2 meanings. So can you find it, or do you find that this sentence have 2 meanings, or it has 1 meaning and not ambiguous? Okay, and so if you find that this sentence is ambiguous and having 2 meanings, please, I want you to do what? To identify the pattern of each meaning. So again, we are going to go back to the patterns. Okay, so as we said, we are going to deal with this video on Tuesday and not on Monday. I want you to study it and watch it carefully. Watch it more than once in order to understand it. And while you are watching or studying it, please write any questions that might come to your mind, anything that you find it difficult, okay? And please feel free to ask during the Google Meet that we are going to have on Tuesday, because your questions are going to be beneficial or useful for the others. Is it clear? Thank you and goodbye.